Welcome into the Football Guys Dynasty Football Show. Here today, we are going to dive through some of our favorite, maybe deep sleepers, deep values. But I'm joined as always with my co-host Jagger May. Jagger, are you starting? Am I starting? Where do you want to go with this? Kind of maybe what's the topic, and let's dive into it.
We are going over our breakouts, and we'll start with you, Jeff, because you have a breakout and someone that I hated when he was a rookie, and now all of a sudden in year two, I keep buying shares. So we'll start with your guy, Will Levis.
Yeah, Will Levis is my guy, quarterback from the Tennessee Titans. We're seeing, and a lot of things that interest me are just the structural changes that the Titans have undergone, particularly bringing Brian Callahan in as coach, bringing Bill Callahan, his father, in as offensive line coach. And Brian Callahan, he was there, ground floor with the development for Joe Burrow, and we've seen what that Cincinnati offense has been able to become. They went out, they added Calvin Ridley, they added Tyler Boyd. They have been pretty not nice about Treylon Burks. It seems like Treylon Burks is not really in their future plans. They're looking for immediate production out of those receivers, relying on veteran receivers with DeAndre Hopkins still there, bringing Tony Pollard in free agency as well, turning around and using that seventh pick of the draft on J.C. Latham to boost up that offensive line. I think you're going to see a lot better offensive line performance with Bill Callahan as the coach there. So really, once you start stacking the pieces together, you've got two great pass catching running backs with Tyjae Spears and with Pollard. You've got much improved offensive line play. You've got much improved wide receiver play with not having Nick Westbrook-Ikine or Burks or whoever it might be as the wide receiver two next to Hopkins. Calvin Ridley is obviously an established player there. So you're finally giving Will Levis an opportunity to succeed. And I think that that's one of the biggest things. He didn't really have that last year. And we know with that Mike Vrabel mindset football team offense, they were going to try to ground and pound with Derrick Henry. They tried to involve both running backs, and Spears was very effective in the passing game. But now I think you're going to see a complete overhaul of the offensive structure, what they're going to play towards. And I think that there are maybe parallels to a very, very, very poor man's Joe Burrow potential in that types of scheme when you look at kind of the skill set that Will Levis does possess. But is that somebody that, I do know you've been grabbing him because we've been doing a couple startup drafts together. And so I've seen
Mhm.
him go off the board there. But what are your general thoughts on Levis?
Yeah, a lot of it is last year I saw a better player than I saw in college, and that's something that I tell everyone, like you can't have take lock or anything like that. So that was the first domino, and then you think about them drafting Peter Skoronsky. I hope that he takes that next step along with getting J.C. Latham there, and then getting the offensive line coach, and all the things you said after that. Like subsequently, they get away from that old mentality of like my defense will win, and if as long as my offense can be at least efficient and score every now and then, we'll be fine. I don't know. I'm not as excited about Brian Callahan. I'm not excited about like Callahan's offense as I would be, let's say, like Shane Waldron in Chicago. But like to me, the last year was the floor. I think we should see something much better solely because of the weapons and at least them having an offensive mind in that building. I'm not saying that they didn't have an offensive coordinator, but it seems like when Arthur Smith left, any type of emphasis on offense kind of left with him. So that's good to see. And then, yeah, I have been taking him because like his sleeper ADP is around the eighth round. If you're in Superflex, that is the last QB2 that I'm comfortable with. I would prefer to have someone else as my QB2. I really like him as my QB3. And especially when you think about the upside that you get, or excuse me, the positional insulation, at least through the entire season that you're going to get with Will Levis. I like him over a lot of the other assets around his range. So it just seems to be easy to click the button. And to be honest, just judging by how our drafts kind of go, I don't know if he's going to stay at QB 21 much longer because even like on underdog, things like that, Will Levis seems to go much higher than his ADP indicates.
Do you have a lean between Calvin Ridley and DeAndre Hopkins on who you're targeting? You mentioned underdog, and I know we're leaning towards dynasty, but at the same time, there are elements of dynasty that value kind of plays off of redraft. Do you have a lean for what wide receiver you want to go with between Calvin Ridley and DeAndre Hopkins?
DeAndre Hopkins, because I mean, again, it's a new offense, so like this data doesn't completely matter. But Will Levis, like, he knows who his guy is and hyper targeted, and I don't think it's going to be Cardinals DeAndre Hopkins, but I definitely think we're still going to see viable production, and it's more like he's cheaper. To be honest, they're not too far apart, especially on underdog. You basically you have to pick one or the other, and I've been picking Hopkins. And a lot of that is I'm not like I have to wait and see it type person, but again, Calvin really does have to show me to be a little bit more consistent. And I do think Tyler Boyd is going to be a little bit more involved than we may think. So.
Yeah, Boyd's an interesting call there in his involvement. And I tend to lean towards Calvin Ridley because I think that when I look at the way really Jamar Chase has been used the last couple of years, they've moved him a lot closer to the line of scrimmage and the lower A dot, allow him to create with the ball in his hands, get him into those types of situations. And I think that that profiles to Ridley to be the volume piece of that. Whereas I think that there are more similarities between Hopkins and T. Higgins in that the way the Cincinnati
Mhm.
offense was structured. But I think they're both. I end up grabbing them just because of where they're landing. It's kind of almost one of the last jump off points at a guy that could have a very large target share and see a high volume of targets. But before we move on and dive into a couple more players that we're going to go through, please take a moment to like and subscribe to this channel. The Football Guys new Dynasty football channel on YouTube has been a lot of fun launching that project with you, and we've seen some great growth there. We appreciate all you subscribers out there, and please continue to pass the word and please share, and thank you so much.
Yeah, and head over to footballguys.com/slash plans. And make sure to do that soon, guys. We have promos going on. We're gonna have a Fourth of July promo. We have a lot of best ball stuff rolling right now, and of course, all of our dynasty content. More importantly, we have a new feature that you guys have been requesting, so stay tuned for that. And not just that, another reason to like, subscribe, and make sure to go leave us reviews on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, because we're going to be giving out Scott Fishbowl entries pretty soon. So make sure you stick around if you haven't gotten your entry yet.
Yeah, that's a great opportunity for you to play in the Scott Fish Bowl, and we definitely want to be able to share with our listeners and get you all in that we possibly can. But I'm surprised that we didn't lead off the show with your guy because I know you've been banging the drum on him quite a bit lately. But why don't you tell people who your top value is?
Yeah, it's even think about somebody who can break out. Almost, you know why I didn't lead with this? Because I think technically Jahan Dotson kind of already has broken out. People just didn't like the way that he did it. And it was easy to dismiss that because he had a bad year. And you're right, Jeff. I've been beating the drum. And when you think about someone who's going in the 12th round and is the wide receiver 57 on Keep Trade Cut, how is that not a good bet? That I just like right now, when you had someone that broke out as a rookie, they get a new quarterback, they get everything new, and they are going as the wide receiver 57 on a keep trade cut, and you can get him as your wide receiver 5 or 4, depending on what your build is. Why is that a bad bet? Do you have a reason, Jeff? Or can I feel like we can just move on because I don't get it. I don't get the haters out here.
It, I mean, people don't. I think a lot of it plays into people were on him last summer and they don't want to get burned again. Is probably some of it, and yeah, I think that people struggle to when they see a player like that struggle for a year. They fail to separate a new situation and implement a new scheme, a new quarterback, and really fail to kind of put together all the sum of pieces that will be able to create a higher ceiling and a higher even floor for Dotson. It'll be a much better opportunity for him. And so I do like this call quite a bit. He's a player that I think is a good player. I mean, exactly like you said, we saw a breakout his rookie year. He was a very productive player that year. I mean, it's going to be a night and day difference with Jaden Daniels in there at quarterback relative to the struggles that they had with Sam Howell, the inability to protect Sam Howell. And the ceiling, I think, is so high in this Washington offense. It's one that I've been wanting to grab pieces of. And Dotson is a great opportunity there. If you're doing underdog, you can pair him with Jaden Daniels very, very cheaply and give you a very high upside stack potential there. But I think that this is a great call.
Yeah, and I get what I find it's odd is the production and how he got it his rookie season. to me was it was an eyebrow raiser because I didn't think he was that kind of player. Like I thought he was a slot guy. I didn't think he would make consistent big plays like that. And to me that like it did the opposite for me. I didn't see touchdown Cologne. I was like, "Oh, wow. Maybe he's a like maybe having Steve Clifford throw to you kind of makes you look like a little dink and dunk guy, but he's a proficient route runner, someone that I really liked. His route charts look great. If you're a follower of Matt Harmon, we have episodes talking about Jahan Dotson, I'm sure. It just doesn't make any sense. He's the obvious guy that has the the lowest price and the highest upside, I think, in fantasy.
Yeah, and who else is going to grab it from him outside of Terry McLaurin? I mean, I know they added Luke McCaffrey in the draft. They added Ben Sennett in the draft, and so maybe some of those guys are contributors there. Diami Brown, no, it's going to be Dotson. They're going to give him an opportunity. So that kind of gives me an opportunity to move into a similar player for my pick, similar valuation. Marvin Mims is a player that he had a lot of excitement around Dynasty. He was steaming up into the second round last year in a lot of rookie drafts, and he kind of fell flat on his face. And but at the same time, if you watch him, if you show what he was able to put out on the field, the explosion is there, the speed is there, that translates well, the return ability translates well. He was on the all rookie team because of his return ability. He's able to create with the ball in his hands. This is a Denver offense that's in year two with Sean Payton's scheme. And I know you're not the biggest fan of Sean Payton, but I think that we're hearing coach speak at least that suggests that Marvin Mims will be primed for a breakout. Whether or not they're able to or willing to move on from Cortland Sutton will remain a open question. And I think it's fair to look at Troy Franklin, the previous relationship with Bo Nix, and lean that direction. But we saw Peyton not wanting to use the rookie last year. And so has Peyton got over that? Or is this the type of thing where Franklin now is going to be the player like Mims that Peyton is feeding us lines every single week saying, well, we need to get him on the field. Meanwhile, Marvin Mims is the actual productive player out on the field.
Um, I have mixed feelings about this because you're right. I don't like Sean Payton. I liked Mims for what he was as a prospect, and I don't understand why he wasn't on the field a little bit more, especially since we know, at least I think that we know who Jerry Judy is. I know there's some folks out there that still believe, but he's so cheap that um, uh, all my misgivings don't really matter because it's baked into his price. Like he's a wide receiver 70 going into the 16th round. He's basically a throw-in piece right now. Like it's kind of like if you're gonna make a deal with someone, don't just make a deal for Marvin Mims. Kind of like build a deal for something else and then get Marvin Mims in there, and you'll probably be happier than just buying him straight up. So um, it's intriguing. Like I said, even Troy Franklin is pretty cheap right now. So like, do I think the Broncos might suck? Yeah, but they're so cheap, and I like the players individually in a vacuum so much that why wouldn't you bet on them? Because at the end of the day, it's like my philosophy is bet on talent. So, and Marvin Mims is a player that, especially when you think about who Bo Nix is, when if you give him a lot around the line of scrimmage, Marvin Mims is the perfect character, the perfect player for that. All it's going to take him is one catch, and then he can break free. So it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing. You see that return ability. He can win at all levels on the field, and so that's where I like that quite a bit, and that's where I've leaned there. And you're exactly right on the valuation, and I think that you make a great point in terms of it's one of those things that if you approach somebody in your league and you straight up try to trade for Marvin Mims, I think maybe the alarm flags go off and they say, well, no, I mean, I spent a second on him. I still believe in him. But if you're changing that eye line and you're looking for at a bigger player and you're throwing Mims in kind of on the bottom side there, gives you a lot of upside and kind of the ability to build some of those creative packages to slide him through and a player that can create a lot of value relative to where he's sitting right now. But I think that you've got another second year player coming up, and I think that this is a good call out too. We touched on the offensive structure here, but who's your pick going to be?
It's Tyjae Spears. I know that Tony Pollard went there, but everything has said it might be an annoying backfield, but at Tajay Spears' cost in the 10th round at RB 22, I'm comfortable with taking him there. And I'm not convinced that Tony Pollard is like is he going to be there in another year? How long is that contract? I think it's the usual funny money one
Yep.
where he gets a lot of money up front, maybe, but in year two they can move on without him. And then in that scenario, I just like to bet on the younger guy. If they are similar players with similar profiles and the coaches have said that they're going to use them equally, just take the younger guy. And then this is someone else I've been drafting, and so like it's I'm not just a salesman, I'm a customer as well. He's an easy RB2 to have. I really like my builds where I have really strong wide receivers, and then I'm getting like Jonathan Brooks and Tyjae Spears as my RB1 or two. And if you really want to do zero RB, then Tajay Spears is pretty cheap. And not only just that, if you need a, granted, you shouldn't be trying to build a full lineup in June, but we're getting close. I mean, June's over halfway over now, so he's cheap enough to where you could fill in a hole at running back pretty easily. Moreover, he's one of my favorite tier down running backs. Let's say like I have a Derrick Henry, a Kenneth Walker, that type of range, and I may want to kind of get a little bit younger, but I don't want to sell the farm. That's who I'm going after. Especially he's RB22 on keep trade cut. That's still relatively cheap.
Yeah, I was not distracted. I was trying to look up and see where Tony Pollard was landing on keep trade cut relative to Tyjae Spears and how much separation there is there, because I think it's interesting how much kind of you see Dynasty Mind leans so hard towards the young player so very
Mhm.
often, but then you run into some of these situations where the vet hasn't proven much relative to kind of Pollard had a good season 2 years ago prior to the
Yeah.
injury, but again, he's a change of pace back, and he's gonna not probably not going to be more than a change of pace back. Whereas Spears, I do kind of think they'll trade off maybe 50-50, but if you're in any sort of PPR format, I think the ceiling is very, very high for what Spears can give you, because I think he has the potential for spike weeks, but at the same time, he's got a good, consistent floor, because I do expect this backfield to really kind of work through the passing game almost and give
Yeah.
Will Levis easy plays that he's able to function off of.
Yeah, I think Tyjae Spears and Pollard are going to have a lot of games where they have 10 carries for 40 or 50 yards, but then they're going to have 3 or 4 catches for 30 yards or something like that. Then if they get a touchdown, then that's a gravy. That's going to give you an RB1 week, and,
Yeah,
that, and I'm okay with that.
at the end of the year, you're looking at like 1,300 all-purpose yards, six,
Yeah.
seven touchdowns, and yeah, I mean, you're looking at a running back too that is
Mhm.
young, and you can grab him at that value. So I think that that's a good one there. Mine is cheaper, maybe in a similar vein, but Chase Brown is going to be my next one with that Cincinnati Bengals offense, and this is a scenario where Zach Moss, at least on keep trade cut, is valued more than Chase Brown, which I think is interesting. We've seen early talk maybe that Moss is going to be that guy in that backfield. I don't know. I don't know how it's going to play out, but Brown to me has the potential to take that job over Zach Moss. Zach Moss is a player that we just were throwing out and forgetting about a year ago, and he was able to step up in some spots with the Colts, and that was a great look for him. But this is an opportunity to grab Chase Brown, the bottom side of that. You're looking at a high upside offense that it's one of those that the path that if Chase Brown does hit in that Bengals offense, you're looking at a player that's flirting with being a top 15 dynasty running back, given the how much fluctuation we see at the position, how much value that holds. It will be an open question. But again, it's a young running back in a high upside offense that I think the potential is there. And at what sleeper ADP 11th round, running back 37, not even a top 3 running back in your stable, ideally. I mean, that's the kind of bets that I think you should be making right now.
Yeah, I mean, it's like same but different with Tajay Spears. With
Yeah.
Chase Brown, I don't think. Let's say if everything works the way the Bengals want it to work, it's going to be another 50-50 split with a little bit more of a set role where we'll see Zach Moss on first and second down, and then Chase Brown should dominate a lot of the third down role. And that really depends on his pass blocking. That wasn't one of his best traits, and if he's improved, I think, to be honest, that's the most underrated thing that I think is going to keep Chase Brown off the field is pass blocking and how much. of Zach Moss was real in 2023, because I just find myself not betting on either of them. But here's one thing that I do find interesting. I find a hard time to take Chase Brown in the 11th round, because in the 10th round, I'd rather, like, that's close to like Tyjae Spears. That's close to like Blake Corum. I'd almost rather go those
Yeah.
places. But his keep trade cut trade value is where it's different. It's almost better to let someone else, let's say you're doing a startup, let someone else draft Chase Brown, then go try to trade for him later. Like, I know that sounds odd, but I mean, like the KTC value, that seems palatable to me. Whereas like the sleeper ADP, I find it a hard time. And like I said, we may not want either of them, but when you think about who's got juice and can break out at least a big run, we've already seen it for Chase Brown.
I think you make a great point there. And that's something that I've noticed quite a bit too, that startup value will be separate from trade value. And
Hmm.
especially once you get into the season, if this is the type of situation where Chase Brown starts slow at all, I think you're going to have people ripping cord and bailing on him. And that's where you're going to be able to step in there and get him for relatively cheap. Whereas when you're sitting in a startup, people are driven towards grabbing younger players. They're looking for to build that future, and they're kind of passing, at least that's what we're seeing in the two startups that we're running right now with our listeners, is heavy lean towards young players, which I mean, I say on this show all the time, and when I'm in a startup, I want to grab the young players, and so part of my heart is very happy to see our listeners going out and doing those things. It kind of, I've joked with you that when you're in your home league, they might know you, but they think you're an idiot. When you're in a listener league, they know you and they're going to beat you at what you're trying to do. And so I think that that's where it's really cool. And it's caused both of us to kind of switch up our strategies and switch up our games a little bit. But that's a great point there, and different values between startups and moving into trade values. But you've got one more near and dear to your heart. Who's your player going to be?
Pop Douglas, Jalen Polk is someone that I like. And I get the hype for it, but I think that we forget that Pop Douglas looked good last year. He was just a Patriot catching passes from Mac Jones and from a coaching staff that was pretty incompetent offensively. So I think we're kind of sleeping on him, and I think it's a bit odd that he's going after Jalen Pogue. And I get like the younger guy is better, but Demario Douglas is still pretty young. And then he's another guy that the spreadsheets love. And I know someone like you knew who Pop Douglas was before a lot of people were, but I mean his profile and his production looked great in college. Like if you look at like all like the year two wide receivers college production and all those age adjusted or whatever adjusted charts, he's always on the good section on the top right on most of them. So the data loves him, the film loves him, and he has just enough production to know that he could be somebody if he just has some confidence or competence around him. I think that he's honestly the guy that you want to own for safety. Like, especially draft Jalen Polk in a rookie draft. I'm not saying don't draft Jalen Polk, don't draft Javon Baker, but in a startup, you should probably take Demario Douglas first, and him going in the 15th round is probably real cheap when he might be the top target on that team. It could be Hunter Henry, but I mean, I'm reading in trading camp right now that Demario Douglas is right now one of the only ones who's consistently with the wide receiver ones. And then and this is a coach and player speak here, but I know that Drake May has already really liked Pop Douglas because it reminds him a lot of Josh Downs, a similar slot guy. So he's someone that I was already aggressive and bullish in buying before they even got Drake May or anything, just because I'm like, hey, I know this team sucks, but this is talent that is being buried because he's on a team that sucks.
I think this is one of the most interesting conversations, maybe in the offseason, that's not talked about a lot. And I think that we all want to see Pop Douglas, we all want to see Jalen Polk, we all want to see Javon Baker. But then you've got Kendrick Bourne, you've got Juju Smith Schuster, you've got KJ Osborne, kind of all these veterans, these uninspiring, unexciting veterans that are all lurking around, and we see it so often that the coaches like to play those veterans, especially a new coach coming in and wanting players that understand their scheme, their system, aren't surprised to be out there. It's almost like two different hockey lines where like, please just play Drake May and the three young wide receivers, and please don't play Jacoby Brissett and the three old wide receivers. I feel like
Yeah.
this is kind of where we're sitting a little bit with this Patriots offense, and I'm really curious to see how that plays out, whether or not. But I think that you make a great point there that I think Douglas is the player that you're not going to see really high spike weeks, I wouldn't expect, but I think you're going to see a lot of consistency coming out of that slot receiver position, and having that 13, 14, 15 point week that can be really big when you're grabbing it in the 15th round and you're just kind of looking for that 10th guy to fill out your lineup or 11th guy to fill out your lineup, really under the radar. And I think he's a great under the radar stash play to go out and target with your league mates, that as Polk and Devon Baker get all the talk and excitement around it, go out there and slide Demario Douglas off their rosters. And I think that can really pay off well for you. But you're exactly right. When right up 70 some wide receivers for the rookie guide, I kind of break it out in sections, and I look at the players that we all know that everybody's talking about, and the kind of that first cut. Then you're sifting through 30 to 40 guys, and Douglas was a player that stood out as we were going through that process. Michael Wilson was another player like that. You're just kind of sifting through the bin, and you're seeing, hey, guy looks different than the other guys that I've been watching, and so I think it's a great call there.
Yeah. Yeah, and again, guys, especially when they're young, that's when you can, especially in Dynasty too, because you're not you're playing a longer game, you have more rounds, and it pushes things down. These younger guys, don't let situation defer. You're in the 15th round. You want someone who's going to has a chance to be the top two target on their team. You can't just go icky Patriots. Ew, just take the guy and let him sit there. You're not if you're drafting Demario Douglas to be your top four guy, you've made some mistakes, or you at least better have some trade value. So these are what we mean by breakouts. These guys are talented. They've had talent. They've just mainly been buried for some either like say like Jahan Dotson or Marvin Mims for some type of QB play, or they're just been behind Derrick Henry, or they've been behind Joe Mixon, these old guys, and now it's their time. So I think that's great. Before we go, since we got some time, we can milk it. We could do a little bit of fan service, and we could break down our current listener league rosters here. I just
All
made
right.
another pick in our this is our Dynasty League 2 Electric Boogaloo. I just picked up another share of Evan Ingram. I currently have Kyler Murray, Jonathan Brooks, Marvin Harrison, Drake London, Jaden Reed, Evan Ingram, and Jared Goff. Oh, and I took Will Levis. Yeah, that's as my QB3. As out of the first two team, or out of these first two ones, we're gonna have one more, the third one. This one's my favorite one. You got a good stack. I like having Jonathan Brooks as my RB1. I got Drake London in the third round, which I think is good value. Jaden Reed, good value. And then you've heard us talk about Evan Ingram a lot. And then I think you took him in our first one, Jared Goff. It's like you said, Jared Goff and Will Levis. That's the last comfort realm in QB2 range. So
Yeah,
who you got on you?
well, it's interesting because we're drafting right next to each other, and I think that our teams, there, when you really break them down, there's a lot of similarities between our teams. And I'm
Mm,
drafting right behind you. I was a little bit surprised at who I was able to get at the 1-9, but I don't blame you for going the direction that you went. You went Kyler in the first round. That allowed me
mm,
to grab Joe Burrow at the 1-9. And so
mm,
I started out Joe Burrow, Bijan Robinson, my wide receivers, AJ Brown, Zay Flowers, Jordan Addison. I've got two tight ends sitting on my roster right now with Kyle Pitts and TJ Hawkinson. And then I did make a couple moves up here. We are in round 8, and I saw one quarterback on the board, maybe like 1.5 quarterbacks on the board, but I moved up and back-to-back sandwich picks, and I grabbed Michael Penix and Kirk Cousins to kind of lock into my quarterback 2 there, hoping for the immediate production from Cousins, hoping that Penix takes over ideally in 2 years. And ideally in 2 years, hopefully Kirk Cousins is still playing football, and I do have a 3 quarterback situation, him playing for somewhere else. When we talk about stacks, I'm loaded up here with Bijan Robinson, Kyle Pitts, and Cousins / Penix. So I've got some action working there in that direction, but I think it's AJ Brown is maybe a little bit older than where I like to go at wide receiver in a startup, but the value of him sitting there in round 3, I think there was a pretty clear separation between him and kind of what was left on the board when I made that pick. And Bijan Robinson is, I don't usually go running back in round 2, but I was really trying hard to move around the board to be able to grab another quarterback, but Robinson seemed to be the best value. I was hoping that kind of one of those top receivers between Jefferson and CeeDee Lamb and Chase were probably dreaming, but then I saw Amon-Ra St. Brown go off the board right before me too. So kind of just took Robinson as the value play there, and maybe some of it, maybe letting Harrison go is because I had Harrison in the other league that we're doing.
Yeah. The only like I said, I really like your team. I'm not an Addison guy, but that like for his value, it's fine. And like I said, he's in like the ideal situation. Is like your QBs I love because you got Cousins, and then something happens. Oh no, I've got Michael Penix. You know,
Yeah.
like you're pretty much okay. And then I don't know what you've heard about Joe Burrow, guys, but he's still pretty good at football, and we probably shouldn't care that much about that wrist injury until it's actually a problem. Um, TJ Hawkinson was a shock to me. I thought that was a little early. Are you still that big of a believer? Like he might not play a lot of the season, especially ahead of someone like the next tight ends, Kelsey, Kittle, Ingram. Who else went around there?
Kelsey went 2 picks after I took Hawkinson. I mean, I
Yeah.
think it's looking at how I usually build and having Addison there, kind of being a little bit leery about what production I'm going to get this year. And I also didn't have a quarterback 2 on my roster at that time, so I wasn't sure the direction I was going to go in. So I went maybe a little bit younger, punting a little bit of early production to grab Hawkinson there relative to kind of having a more of a win now build and going with Kelsey. I just don't like drafting old guys, and TJ Hawkinson is about as, and AJ Brown are about as old as I'll get in a startup. When I looked at some of the other players, I mean, there was a run of older wide receivers with Deebo Samuel, Mike Evans, Davante Adams coming off the board. Keon Coleman was sitting there, and I thought about that, but I think given that we're playing in a tight end premium format and having Kyle Pitts and TJ Hawkinson paired together, that gives me I think that I can play Hawkinson as a flex play weekly when he's back healthy. And if there's any sort of established quarterback play out of the Vikings offense relative to maybe doubling down, because I did just grab Coleman in our other draft.
Yeah, and then moving towards our other draft, I know you guys are gonna listen to this. This is the wildest draft I've ever been in. I'll make sure to put a screenshot or something so you guys look at this. I've never seen a startup draft board look this messy. Almost every pick has
Wow.
been traded. Like it is, it's a lot to look at, guys. It is. Let's put it this way: these degenerates are so ready to deal that I had to like lower the clock. I'm like, come on, guys, we got to move this a little bit. I know that everyone's down to wheel and deal, but you got to love it. My roster, I don't love this one as much because to be honest, this was our first one, and I guess I wasn't ready. I wasn't ready for you guys, and like Jeff said, we really had to pivot hard. So you had me on the ropes. My QBs are Lamar Jackson and Drake May. Interesting note on Drake May. I had someone ask me because I posted these on Twitter. If they said that Drake May going in the third round is the earliest that they've seen it. Do you think, granted that was ahead of ADP in both leagues, but he did go third round in both leagues. Do you think that's going to be the norm pretty soon? Or do you think that we are just a particular group that likes the youngins more than others?
We definitely like the young players, and our listeners definitely like the young players, and that feeds into it. I think that oftentimes you'll get into a startup that will defer a little bit more towards established players and safety. But it seems like every single year there is a young quarterback that's sitting in round 3. Even going back to 2020, I remember Josh Allen sitting in round 3. Is CJ Stroud last year kind of falling into that range in some drafts? It seems like there's always that young quarterback in round 3 that coming out of his rookie year ends up being a top 6, top 7 pick. And I think that Drake May has a very good chance of being that player in Superflex. I mean, that's the bet that you're making. Some of that's sitting there. Let's see who else was on the board when May went off. Um, I mean, you took him in front of Brock Purdy, Tua, Jared Goff. I mean, would it surprise anybody if May is considerably more valuable than any of those players in a year from now? Because I
No.
don't think so. No, I think that
And
May,
I was gonna say rushing upside alone. People forget that he
yeah,
can rush a little bit. Yeah.
yeah,
Mm.
he can. Yeah, but like I said, this is one of those that I said during the draft process, I feel like there's a lot of similarities with CJ Stroud and Drake May, where we get prospect fatigue as some of it. We see the new exciting player, whatever it might be. We invent reasons why we're off a player. But yeah, the package that Drake May has, I mean, Justin Herbert might be a good comp, but it's just that one of those that the other thing too is you're kind of dealing with, it's hard to look at it linear rounds in like round 3 versus round 5 when you're kind of dealing with the same pool of players. And if Drake May
Yeah.
is the player that you want, grab Drake May.
Yeah. And it's like to fill out the rest of the team, and because I got Drake May and how the board went, I didn't get crazy to take people I don't want. I kind of think this is going to be a year one soft punt. Like I'm not going all in, but I don't. I definitely this is the roster I would roll with to win now. But yeah, like I said, I had Lamar Jackson, Drake May. I still don't have a QB3 yet, but I have my running backs Trey Benson and Tyjae Spears and Blake Corum. I'm fine with those running backs in any build. But they're young. I'm still probably going to have running backs. Where I have issues is I love Garrett Wilson. That's not the problem. Brian Thomas and Jaden Reed as my wide receiver 2 and 3. I don't love. I tend to want a higher upside wide receiver ahead of that. Like I really was hoping to get Chris Olave, but I got sniped right before then. And then and if you really look at the board and why so many people have traded, the wide receiver talent dried up so fast in this league that where I had to just be like, okay, the guys that I really like are gone. I'll just kind of pivot and trade down a little bit and acquire value in other areas. And then in tight end, I have Mark Andrews, which is fine. Then your team, Jeff?
My team's a mess, to be honest with you. I think similar to you, where I was caught a little bit off guard from the wheeling and dealing. And I mean, to be honest, I have not done a lot of startups this off season because I was trying to right size the amount of leagues that I'm playing in, and it just kind of naturally fell that way. And then I wanted to do these leagues with our listeners and kind of make those my startups. But I've got Patrick Mahomes, which is cool. I've got Marvin Harrison, and then I've got Keon Coleman, and then I don't have any other wide receivers. I've got Sam Laporta and Jake Ferguson, which was like a pick at like 6 o'clock this morning when my eyes were barely open, and I was like, I better draft a player here. And then I've got Jared Goff. I've got Michael Penix. And that's my roster. I've got 2 first-round picks from other teams coming in, rookie draft picks, a second-round pick coming in as rookie draft pick. So I've made some deals there to acquire some future capital. I'm probably going to slot Luther Burden in as my wide receiver 2 after this year because outside of these quarterbacks and maybe the tight end, I don't know that I'm going to be winning a lot of games.
Yeah, that's me and you are probably like I might scrape for the playoffs. I could definitely pivot, but I don't. Me and you are not the favorites in this league. Good job, guys. You did it early. You
Yeah.
got ahead of us. But I guess that'll do it for this episode, Jeff. Like we said, guys, we're going to be giving out some Scott Fishbowl entries, so make sure to stay vigilant on that. Other than that, we have Heath Cummings coming on. That'll be one of our Monday shows. Anything else before we take us out, Jeff?
No, thank you so much for being here, and we appreciate all of you. It's been so fun this last week or so to really play with our listeners and be able to play in these leagues with our listeners and be able to see that you might think that we're idiots, but you listen to a little bit of what we say, and no, it's been a lot of fun. It's been a great experience, and thank you so much. Just love the Football Guys community, and we love all of our listeners, subscribers, and we appreciate it all.
Yeah. So we'll see you guys on the next one.